Hello, Aunt. I'm Dave. And first, I want to thank you for replying to my initial email. Sorry about the dog in the background. She had been quiet up until now. Anyway, thank you for replying to my initial email and for emailing back and forth and expressing an interest in learning about how I've adapted to be able to be a photographer hobbyist. Emphasize hobbyist because I'm definitely not a pro. Anyway, before I get into showing you what I do or how I do it, I want to explain my injury. I was injured. I don't remember if this was in what you had read about me or not, but I was injured in a water skiing accident. I dove off of my ski. Basically, it was a diving accident, but it's a lot more interesting to say it was a water skiing accident. Anyway, but I dove and hit the bottom, and long story short, I damaged my fifth cervical vertebrae. Actually, I believe I smashed it in the front. And breaking the vertebrae isn't actually what caused the problem. It was the ensuing damage to the spinal cord. And as a result of that, I am a quadriplegic. And I used to think quadriplegic was someone who was quadriplegic didn't have any movement from the neck down, and that's not the case. Quadriplegic, it can be that, but it's someone who has paralysis basically affecting all limbs, all their limbs. I was going to say all limbs below the neck, but all limbs are below the neck. And a newer term being used for quadriplegic is tetraplegic, so you'll hear that sometimes as well. I think that's just a more modern terminology. Anyway, as a result of that injury, I have paralysis basically from the way they'll explain it is the nipple line down, or in this case, the Marvel logo down. And some people will look at me and think, oh, well, you have full use of your arms and everything. And a lot of people will think I'm a paraplegic. But because my injury was in the cervical vertebrae, specifically at C5, there's certain things, in the upper body, certain muscles and nerves that are controlled, lots of muscles and nerves that are controlled below, from below the C5 level. So long story short, I can control things, control muscles that, where the message comes from the spinal cord above C5, but I don't have voluntary control over any of my muscles that are controlled by messages coming out of the spinal cord or coming from the spinal cord below C5. Anyway, that's neurology, at least spinal cord neurology in a nutshell. So what that means for me is, let's start with my hands. Obviously, hands are a pretty critical part of photography. My hands are paralyzed. You can see it. This is the resting position of my hands. I used to say that I can't use my hands. And as I have been injured almost 40 years, and I've learned to do a lot with my hands, from writing to, holding a pen and pencil, whatever. If I need to do it, I try to figure out a way to do it. And so I can use my hands. My hands are paralyzed. That's the correct way to say it. Yes. And people have a hard time grasping this. And I've given talks to schools, elementary school kids and high school kids. And the way I explain this is I'll ask kids and teachers, to put their hands up. And then I'll say, wiggle your fingers. And everybody, it's neat to see, an audience full of people wiggling their fingers. And I say, I can't do that. My brain, I'm telling myself right now, wiggle fingers. Doesn't work. So the message comes from my brain, but it doesn't doesn't get out to my spinal cord, or doesn't get out to the muscles because of the damage in my spinal cord. So I can't voluntarily move my fingers with my wrists. Let's see, there we go. So I can lift my wrist this way, but I cannot lift my wrist. I can't pull it up this way. The muscle that does that is paralyzed. With my arms, I'll back up here a little bit. My biceps are pretty strong. I can get somebody in a headlock and playing, of course, but my biceps are strong and my shoulders are strong. However, the triceps muscle that runs along the back of the arm, I can't use that. I can't voluntarily trigger that muscle again because of the damage to my spinal cord. So that is my body in a nutshell, and what I can use, what I can't use. So let's dive into how I've adapted to, I'll just say, be a photographer. And I always wanted to be a photographer. Back in college in, late 80s, I picked up a Pentax K1000 and had a remote wired trigger that I would put in my mouth. And I kind of gave up on that, largely because, well, with a film camera, you're not getting the feedback. And I just didn't. I think I got frustrated pretty quickly, and that particular camera was difficult to, for me to focus and whatnot. But anyway, fast forward, 30 years after that, and I was at an event. Actually, it was the Grand Prix, St. Petersburg Grand Prix, and I saw a guy with a similar injury to mine, taking photos. I thought, oh my gosh, I got to talk to this guy. So that's basically where I got the idea for what I do now. So I have here my trusty Nikon D5000. Another thing with my paralysis is if I start, I don't have control of the muscles in my trunk. So if I lean too far forward, I'm going to fall flat, against the desk or on my lap. So I really need to hold on to things when I move around. And like, for instance, to pick up the heavy camera right in front of me, it's kind of heavy because it has a 100 to 400 lens on right at the moment. If I try to pick that up out in front of me, I can't do it because I'm going to fall forward. So I will often have to, like if I'm at a desk like I am right now, I'll put one of my elbows or both on the desk to help support me. So you might see me doing some unorthodox movements, but that's why. So Nikon D1 or D5000, this sucker is probably 13 years old by now, but you can see I have in the jack on the side here, I have a sensor for a remote trigger. Now what I used to do, the way it first started out, was I had the sensor plugged in here, and I'd have it mounted to the hot shoe, and then I had the actual remote trigger that I would just keep in my mouth. And long story short, that got ruined by saliva. So I've just been using the hardwired part, since that has a button on it. So I'll show you how I do that. And I don't know if I'm going to edit this video at all. I realize I'm almost at 10 minutes. So if you're still watching, thanks for hanging in there with me. Putting a strap on for me is very important, and I like the old school John Denver guitar strap, hippie looking camera straps. Picked up a bunch of these at a local camera shop, and get that on there. So this is really important because if I lose my grip on the camera, which I've done many times, this keeps the camera from hitting the ground. And I'm very, there were very few times I don't put this on when my camera is in hand. And I'm having a heck of a time getting that straight. There we go. Well, it's inside out, but that's all right. Okie doke. So, to turn the camera on, and I'm really going into detail here, but most people would just, take their thumb, flip the switch. But I go ahead and I stabilize. I'm stabilizing with my left hand under the camera, and then I'll stabilize with my chin. And whoops, there we go. Probably heard the click, camera's on. And it's actually a little more difficult to do sitting at my desk. So let me back up here, and I'll demonstrate more from how I would a position that I typically be in. So like I said a few minutes ago, I have the I have a Tamron 100 to 400 lens on here right now, and it's a bulky lens. So I probably should have put on a shorter lens. You'll notice, or you may notice, I'm tilting my chair back right now, so I can adjust the angle of my chair, which is really helpful. This chair actually goes up and down too vertically, which can be really good in some circumstances if I'm out taking photos. So anyway, camera's on, and then I'll just go ahead and put this in my mouth. I'll put it back in because I want to demonstrate how I hold the camera. So you remember I mentioned a little bit ago that if I just hold the camera out in front of me, I'm going to fall forward. So it's really important for me to get this elbow planted. I typically plant it on my armrest here. Sometimes I'll do it down on my leg if I'm trying to get something a little lower, or if I'm somewhere on a boardwalk or someplace where there's a railing, I might put my elbow up higher to stabilize that. So this is my stabilizing arm, and let's see how I'm using the strap here to move the camera around. I realize you can't see everything that's going on, just adjusting on my lap. So I have my right arm under the lens, and then I'm using my two hands to get a hold of this. I have the camera against my chest. I don't know that I've ever really analyzed in so much detail how I do this, but I get my left hand pretty much under the center of gravity, depending on the lens. So with this being a longer lens, center of gravity is out a little bit farther, and as you can see, that's pretty stable. So I might be out and about, and I can be moving around in my chair holding this as long as it's not too bouncy. And when I'm ready to shoot, as far as zooming in and out, it's difficult for me to grab the dial and turn. So a lot of times I'll just use, not move the center of gravity out farther. So now I have to adjust my left hand, and you'll notice how I keep my chin up against the camera to add a little extra stabilization there. So zooming in and out, that's often how I'll do it. Sometimes I will, especially with some of the other lenses I have, I'll have to put it on my lap and use two hands to adjust the level of zoom. Anyway, once I'm ready to shoot, I'll have this in my mouth, like that. Let's see. Let's do that again. I miss a lot of photos. I mainly shoot nature, and a lot of times I'll miss photos because I'm fumbling around trying to get things in my mouth or set up, what have you. But hey, that's life. So anyway, stick it in my mouth. And that's my typical shooting position. One thing I often do is, I typically keep my shutter release in burst mode, because sometimes when I'm taking photos, I might be a little shaky, just, because, well, hey, I can't be as stable as if I had use of all my muscles. So I've found that in burst mode, I might fire 2 or 3 shots instead of just one, and a lot of times the second one, if the first one's slightly blurry, the second one or the third one will be a little more crisp, just because that didn't catch the whatever shaking was going on. Well, yeah, so that's how I have adapted to be a photographer, and I really enjoy it. One other thing I wanted to show you was this Manfrotto arm that I have, and I got this idea from the guy that I mentioned earlier, who really gave me some ideas on how I could adapt. Oops, now I'm all tangled up. But he was using this type of Manfrotto arm, and he could, see, there's a bracket on the bottom, clamp that to a part of my chair and tighten it, and then this arm here, I could swing that over to have it in front of me, and then I have a, tripod mount up here with a quick release mount. I have the male end attached on my camera, and I've used this for some longer exposure things. Difficult to do in my chair because I have to stay completely still, and even my heartbeat sometimes could get picked up if my heart's really pumping. So frankly, I don't use this very much. I've just really found that I don't need it. So really, I appreciate your interest. I know my lighting, my background, my mic, none of it's the best, and my mic is on my desk, so you probably heard some bumps when I touched my desk. But thanks for hanging in there with me, and if you'd like to discuss any more or have any questions, feel free to ask. I'd love to inform more people about adapting just in general. I enjoy dare I say, inspiring people? Anyway, I won't get too deep there, but I like to inform people, I like to teach. So if you want to learn more, let me know. Or if you have any other people you think might be interested, I'd be happy to talk to them or record a video for them or whatever. Anyway, I'll sign off for now. Thanks very much, Ant, and yeah, look forward to corresponding some more. Take care.